Did the eye go over Tifton, or is it a little to the west, son? Well, so they was on that strong side of it. Yeah. It was on that east side.
Okay, the
you don't
Brunswick-Glynn
wanna be
County
on.
Joint Water Sewer Commission meeting for Thursday, October 18, 2018 will come to order. I'll do the invocation, and Commissioner Browning, if you lead us in the pledge. And we all rise. Lord, we are meeting today to conduct matters of business of the Brunswick-Glynn County Joint Water Sewer Commission. Guide our hearts and our minds in the spirit of fairness, right thought, and speech. Impart your supreme wisdom upon our activities so that our affairs may reach a successful conclusion for the benefit of all Glynn County residents. Thank you for being our source of guidance today. Amen.
Please join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Do we have any public comment? Okay.
You need to excuse a couple of commissioners.
Yeah. I need a motion to excuse Commissioner Copeland and Commissioner Harvey. They notified us way in advance of their intended absence for today. So could I have a motion to excuse their absences?
So moved.
Okay. Second. I pick one for second and one for the motion. All those in favor, please raise your right hand. Okay, motion carried. Also, I'd like to add to the discussion portion of our meeting today the topic HR policies. It's going to cover shift differential pay update, holiday pay policy, and emergency and inclement weather policy. So could I have a motion to add that as item 4 under discussion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor, I can't talk, please raise your right hand. Motion is carried. All right, we'll start with approval of the minutes for October 4 regular meeting, and then after that, we'll do the minutes for the executive session. So once I have a motion to accept, or correction to accept the minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to accept the minutes from October 4, 2018 regular meeting.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Second. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor, please raise your right hand. The minutes are approved. I need a motion for the executive session.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to accept the minutes from October 4, 2018 executive session.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor, please raise your right hand. And the motion is carried. All right. Next item is ratify approval to increase Friendly Express betterment. This is an email that I sent you all requesting that your approval to increase the amount that we approved from $200,000 to $220,000. At tab 3 should be the motion.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that the Brunswick-Glynn County Joint Water Sewer Commission execute the revised memorandum of understanding between the Brunswick-Glynn County Joint Water Sewer and Friendly Express designating the water and force main improvements as a capital project in an amount not to exceed $220,000.
That was second. Second. Okay. Any discussion? Thank you. All those in favor, please raise your right hand. Motion is carried.
Good deal.
All right, next is the on-site water and sewer systems dedication. Mr. Todd Klein.
Thank you. Feedback? Thank you. This is, you'll start seeing these more routine. Hopefully it'll start becoming more routine as projects are completed. particularly on the private development side, you'll see easements sometimes we're provided with, and also the transfer of ownership from private to public of the infrastructure itself. That's exactly what this is. It's the closure.
Must be your personality.
I was doing that earlier,
Static,
made some
man.
eerie noise throughout the building.
On page 2, and kind of summary, it's a pretty hefty document. I think we can summarize it with page 2 pretty much. The table at the very top explains what this is. There's 3 projects at hand that we're looking at. Enclave Phase 1, apartment complex, recently completed Phase 1. The Orchard subdivision off Demery Road on St. Simons, and also Lakeview Cottages. Each one of those has a component of transfer of ownership to joint water and sewer. The infrastructure itself, I think one easement, one has an easement. The Enclave Phase 1 has an easement involved with it. And that's what that is. This is really diligently trying to bring these projects to a completion at the end. We've had a workshop here recently on public or private ownership questions and things. It's very important at the end of a project to make sure you get to completion. And completion is once the transfer of ownership happens. The board makes that decision whether or not they accept the infrastructure for public ownership, and then also the easements. Sometimes at the end of projects, things are rushed through and these little details are forgotten, then 10 years down the road, we're either missing an easement that we need or there's an ownership question, et cetera. This is all an effort that we have to do to bring projects to completion.
Has the attorney reviewed the documentation?
That's as a step of this, all transfers and dedications are reviewed by JWC Legal Advisement, and easements especially are combed through very particularly, and everything's in order by the time that we bring it before the commission.
So we have easements on all those water and sewer lines. We either have easements or they're in public right of ways.
If they're in public right-of-ways, we don't require an easement.
So we have
We have-
easements over.
Correct. We only need, or only deeded easements in the case of private right-of-ways or it crosses private property. In that case, we would need that easement to access and maintain.
Who determine the fair market value?
That's determined by the engineer of record.
We put those numbers in our,
Yes, the fair market value of the assets transferred to us are reported as capital contribution as revenue each year.
we need a motion for this. I make a motion for Brunswick-Glynn County Joint Water and Sewer Commission. I make a motion that Brunswick-Glynn County Joint Water and Sewer Commission accept the following for ownership, operation, and maintenance. Enclave Phase 1, on-site water and sewer infrastructure and associated easement. The Orchard Water and Sewer Infrastructure Limited within the right-of-way. And Lakeview Cottages, on-site water and sewer infrastructure.
Second.
Is there any discussion? Okay, seeing no discussion, I'll call the vote. All those in favor of the motion, please raise your right hand. Motion is carried.
Thank you. And just to conclude with that, after the board's decision on this, our next milestone is we take it to our mapping department. Mapping converts all this proposed or private to blue and green, which means it's joint water sewer owned. And then it goes out to the operations folks, so they're notified that it's now ours to maintain. So, thank you.
Okay, we're to item 5, backflow compliance program update.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I apologize, we had some audio changes earlier that I wasn't aware of that may have some negative consequences. So if we get any feedback while you're speaking, Lucas is going to be adjusting that as well, so hopefully we don't get the call of the whales again like we did. So based on the the discussion item that we had a few weeks back, I gave you a brief update on exactly what goes into the review of plans for the sake of the backflow program. And the irrigation systems have been required to purchase a meter with a testable backflow preventer from the JWSC while paying for these new connections. We've been doing that for, say, 2 to 3 years now. And as a hazard associated with irrigation is considered low to medium, in most cases, a testable device would only be required if construction plans indicate intent to install direct injection of pesticides, thereby making the connection a high hazard to our distribution system. There's very few positive confirmations and historical record where that's been the case, but as those become more and more prevalent, then we want to be able to have the latitude to say in those cases, yes, you would be required to have a testable device. But for the most part, the hazard associated with the irrigation system is not any higher than that of a single-family residence domestic use. In all other cases, the dual check installed by the JWSC within the meter box would provide adequate protection for our customers. In the absence of one of those dual checks, we would require it. So let's say somebody has the highest hazard device in RPZ, and that device is removed, and it thereby saves them the annual inspection cost. We would confirm that they would install, at their expense, a dual check device within the meter box so that the system would still be protected from backflow or back siphonage into the distribution system. So in order to afford the backflow compliance coordinator the latitude to waive the requirement for the JWSC to install a testable backflow preventer for all irrigation connections, Appendix A of the rate resolution would have to be amended to remove the specific references to irrigation, operational, and installation fees highlighted in red on the copy that you have. Where the risk warrants the installation of a testable device, the backflow compliance coordinator would require the customer to contract with a licensed plumber or a certified backflow preventer tester to install the appropriate device. That being said, any questions regarding the intent to revise the rate resolution?
Is this for residential irrigation systems?
Would be for residential and commercial, yes, sir. So in any case where there's a low-risk commercial facility, we have the latitude now to not require a testable device if it's something like an accounting office or an attorney's office. But for an irrigation system on residential or commercial, the present rate resolution calls out specific terms regarding the installation of an irrigation meter, so the RPZ would be required. We're going to thereby remove that requirement with the removal of those 3 lines: irrigation operational for a 1-inch and 2-inch, and then backflow and installation on pre-existing residential irrigation meters. So this would cover the requirement on commercial and residential, and thereby making it more clear that we have an active program where we are taking the stance that we want to review the plans and protect our connections based on the hazard, not just a carte blanche across the board testable device requirement.
But we do have a backflow preventer.
Yes, sir. There would be a backflow preventer installed in all cases. Right. Whether it's testable or not would be dependent upon the hazard.
Don't we have a backflow preventer at every water meter also?
We do not presently have a dual check on every connection. That hasn't always been a priority during the installation of residential meters, but we do have a program that's going to allow us to get back on track with that and have those installed for the low-risk connections. Yes, sir.
So this would just wipe out those 3 things?
Correct, yes, sir. It wouldn't wipe out the likelihood that a high-risk connection would have it installed, but it would eliminate our need to install the device ourselves. The JWSC meaning. So the customer would still potentially have to install the device if our program indicates that that's a high or a medium-risk hazard that requires the device. We're not going to eliminate the need for the device in those cases, just on the low-risk cases.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think that's probably one of the biggest benefits to us, getting us out of it,
Yes, sir, indeed.
So,
The operations staff would very much like to stop installing on
yeah, I just imagine. So, I don't see any benefit in us being in the business of doing that, so, I'm ready to make a motion.
Okay.
I make the motion that the JWSC remove the requirement for staff to install a testable backflow preventer on all irrigation connections and allow customers to hire a private party to install those devices when appropriate. The rate resolution is to be amended to remove references to the installation fees associated with testable devices.
I'll second it.
Is there any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion, please raise your right hand. Motion's carried.
Thank you very much.
All right. We're in the discussion portion, and Mr. Mark Riles.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I'm wondering, might we want to, I know we made a motion to add discussion item 4, but could we move it up to number 1 and let that lady,
Oh, okay.
and then we could do our,
Yeah.
I thought that's what we did.
Say again?
I thought that's what we did, I didn't realize.
No.
well, we had item 4,
Four,
but,
we
but I
moved-
think the sequence of hearing it, maybe we should do it 1.
Yeah.
All right. Is there any objections? Okay, I don't think we need to. We'll take you,
You know, I'm short and sweet. It's wastewater, but I'm short and sweet. Have a second. Look. So, I got,
yeah, that's right, you don't have to, yeah.
You're two. You're second.
But it's for your division mostly.
After Cindy.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. In the two things I want to talk about is to bring an update on the shift differential pay policy. This was a proposal that we started working on in May at the request of Mr. Riles and Mr. Junkin. And there was a lot of research that was done by Rodora Tootin at Teamwork Services to be able to configure our timekeeping system and payroll system to make this shift differential and job coding possible. We did go live, the commission did approve the shift differential pay at a previous meeting, that it would go into effect, giving, for shift workers that start between 12 noon and 1 a.m. for their regular shift, that they would get $1 an hour incentive as a shift differential pay. We did go live with that, with the research completed at Teamwork Services, and that went live as of October 8th. So the beginning of the pay period for October 8th is when that, the shift codes and things went into effect. I know there was some discussion, as far as looking at the overall compensation, if that was feasible or not, but that did go into effect and did start October 8th. The other item, that did make changes to the HR standards of practice in 2 different sections of the employee handbook. One of them is 4.1, attendance and hours worked. We added that to 4.1-2, that employees who work a qualifying shift are eligible for shift differential pay of $1 per hour. Qualifying shift is a regularly scheduled work shift that is at least 8 hours long, that begins, as I said, between 12 noon and 1 a.m. Shift differential pay only applies to hours actually worked. It was also addressed in the pay plan, section 6.2, with wording in the employee handbook under 6.2-5. Shift differential pay, employees who work a qualifying shift are eligible for premium pay of $1 per hour. I need to change that word. We changed it to shift differential rather than premium. I'll make that change. A qualifying shift is a regularly scheduled shift that is at least, as I said, 8 hours long, begins 12 noon to 1 a.m. Shift differential pay only applies to actual hours worked. So other than changing out the word premium for shift differential, those 2 things are ready to be added to the final draft of the employee handbook. The second thing to talk about is holiday pay. There was with shift workers, which is the wastewater distribution division, how the holiday policy is worded. With the 11 paid holidays, the shift workers, their holidays are observed on the day that they fall. So if they weren't working, they didn't always get the true holiday benefit for the company. So we proposed changing the holiday policy, and that is on, also in attendance and hours work, section 4.1, to reword it to holiday hours and annual hours in a holiday week should only count as hour work for overtime computation purposes if the employee was normally scheduled to work those days. If an employee receives holiday hours for a day they weren't scheduled to work, those hours would not count toward their 40 hours of overtime purposes. Also, we added that if employees are scheduled to work on the holiday and they do work the holiday, they will receive double time pay, and holiday hours would not apply. The regular holiday compensation was employees who worked on the holiday got 1.5 times of pay. And for the shift workers, we figured that they would get double time pay, but not additional holiday pay. So to assist the shift workers, which were usually shortchanged on pay, they would get double time, but not holiday pay.
Is this better understood by the employees now?
I believe so, yes. They were hoping that it went into effect already, but we deferred that till after the compensation for the staff was reviewed. So that has not been approved as of yet. It's up for approval. There's a second section that would be changed in the handbook if this is approved. It's section 4.4 of the holiday policy itself. On number 2, the policy reads, all employees, including new employees who have not completed the introductory employment period, will be paid holiday pay for scheduled work hours that fall on the holiday when they are not required to work the scheduled hours. Employees whose schedule would not normally require work on a holiday will receive 8 hours of holiday pay. To continue on in that same section, 4.4-1, non-exempt employees who are normally scheduled to work on the holiday and do work their normal shift will receive double time for working their scheduled shift on the holiday. Again, holiday pay would not apply, but they'd be compensated by getting double time. Non-exempt employees who are not required to work their normal scheduled hours on the holiday, but who are called back into work or take SCADA calls will receive pay for those non-scheduled hours based on normal policies for those hours in addition to their holiday pay. So those two things we thought would make it more equitable for the shift workers, which is the staff that work in wastewater treatment plant, because it is around-the-clock operation and they're working shift work all the time.
Okay. This is the discussion item today.
Yes.
Okay, he's gonna bring it back to the commission for approval?
Well, we were requested to go through the workshop first before we put it back on the agenda, so we can certainly bring it back next meeting if it's
Okay.
preferred.
Didn't we say we were gonna look at that $1 though and see if it needed to be higher than $1?
Some of the commissioners did wonder if $1 was enough of an incentive. That was brought up.
We did some research. Ms. Janice called some of the other utilities to check where we were at comparatively. 10, yeah. And the vast majority of them don't offer shift differential at all. Janice, who was the one that had the odd, by pay grade or some JEA?
I believe that was JEA.
Had an odd, crazy to track method of, depending on your pay grade, what you are, you've got a different differential.
I think that's because they're union. I think they're union.
For us, I tried, when I proposed this originally, I tried to keep it simple, modeled it after something I'd seen where I came from, and I think we're slightly below that by a few pennies, but not by a substantial amount, if at all. I think we're stepping in the right direction. I don't think we're lowballing at this point.
I have a question. Do we have any policy now that addresses, say, an employee that's maybe put in his regular time during the day, and especially in our maintenance type folks? Say we get a break, a major break, and they, about the time they were gonna knock off, and they go out and have to dig up a line, and they work on that thing all evening and all night, continuous. Do we have anything about addressing how long an employee can work continuously, like they can work
16
no longer than 16 hours or 24 hours, and then also,
OSHA says.
huh?
OSHA made that rule.
Yeah, okay, I just wonder if we understood that and then being sure that they get the proper break when they do knock off.
Just make sure
That
that
they
And
come
there
back.
is,
following the rule.
there's a policy too about on-call pay, someone that is called back in after their regular shift. So they do have a
Well,
separate policy.
I'm not too concerned about what the pay would be. I'm just concerned that, because I know it's recognized as a safety hazard, you know, if you work people too long, and then also, if you work them so long, they should get a certain amount of break before they come back into work. And, I don't know what that is today, but,
We go to 16 hours, and then even in emergency situations, hurricane response and stuff, max you can work at 16 hours, and you have to knock off for some period of time to get some sleep. I don't know that we have officially stated what that is. It usually ends up being at least 8 hours.
It's usually
because-
8 hours.
Usually at least 8 hours. I don't know that that's specified in any of our practices, but we do. We stick pretty hard and fast to that 16-hour rule.
okay.
So we've not passed this yet, it's not implemented?
The shift differential is, the other ones are not.
Okay.
Mr. Junker, would you like for me to print that spreadsheet, provide to the commissioners?
I don't think, not necessarily unless commissioners would like it.
I'm good.
And the other policy that was mentioned, we need to wait on, the emergency and inclement weather policy. That's been discussed. I don't think that we're ready to present any revisions in a written form yet for that one.
Okay.
Okay? Any questions?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Mark Rouse, Superintendent of Wastewater Treatment, I'm here to give an update on the plant flows and parameters, influent, effluent, removals and rainfall. As you look at your top sheet there, for the month of September, which permit monitoring report has to be in by the 15th of October, which has been submitted. We was actually at Pinova. I should have went a little bit more detail, but it's in millions of gallons a day. Effluent flow for Academy Creek, 6.3, 0.8 for Pinova. Effluent flow, 7.3 at a 54% capacity. Looking over at the effluent concentrations, of course, we also include ammonias and the phosphorus. See what's coming into the plant so that we have an ideal removal of what the plant is doing inside. Just stepping back, pH, BOD, and TSS, they about average. I had a documentation I had to submit. I think I submitted to Mr. Junkin today, something that some practice here wanted, and it asks about the average BOD. So we run basically that average BOD run between 155, 160 annually.
What's that,
BOD?
for Pinova?
No, BOD for the plant itself.
What's Pinova's BOD?
Influent BOD Pinova, it varies anywhere from 160 to 260. I mean, somewhere along in there. I mean, would you like that on there as well?
Well, no, but what's the COD? Do we do that?
Yeah, we do a COD on Pinova.
It's not on our.
Yeah, it's not on our, you know, the BOD and the COD is not actually on our permit, but as a whole, it's mixed in with our influent.
COD is chemical oxygen demand.
Yeah.
It's an easier test.
Okay.
And you get it a lot quicker. It doesn't take 5 days to get that number.
Takes about 4 hours to get that number, and it's about a third of a BOD is about a third of that number. Okay, effluent concentrations, of course, these are parameters that we govern on each month. These are the parameters that we definitely achieve and exceed most of the time. As you can see, a BOD of 55 coming into the 153 coming into the plant. We got a BOD of 7 going out. So the removal removal efficiency is about 95% during this month. We usually hang around up in the 90s on the BODs, also in the 90s, lower to upper 90s on the TSS as well.
How many BOD tests we take per week on each plant? 5?
Yeah, we got 5-day BOD. I mean, on we do 3 days on Dunbar, Southport, and 5 on
Okay.
Academy Creek.
And all 3 plants are well within permit.
Yes, sir. As we go along here, on the Dunbar, we got an average BOD of 134 coming in and a 2 going out. Southport, 142 coming in and 4.8 going out. Yeah, that's kind of tight right there. Moving on to the second sheet, we're looking at Dunbar. Of course, we don't have any industrial at Dunbar, so therefore, no added flow as far as industrial goes that not necessarily runs through the sewer system. But September was kind of a low amount, I should say, 2.6 flow, influent flow, 2.6 going out, 64% capacity. Looking at the parameters, 134, 137 TSS. Of course, the ammonia's in the phosphorus coming in. If you look at the total phosphorus going out, we did have some phosphorus removal. That's over the effluent concentration area. But the numbers are fairly good, fairly consistent to what we see this time of year, unless we get a hell of a storm or something. But we do pretty good.
So really we got 64% of the capacity of that plant.
During that particular month there, but like I say, maybe, I think I have some questions about the I&I or whatever. I mean, like I say, it depends on the rains, depends on, the usage. We'll see this what, Georgia, Florida weekend's when? Next week. So we'll see some flow.
Next week it'll go up a lot.
Yeah, it's go up a lot. Definitely see some flow next weekend.
So it's mostly inflow, not infiltration then.
Yes. What it appears to be to me, yes.
Yeah.
And definitely you can tell if you look at the numbers on the rainfall, it's those high intensity rains, not the cumulative effect of the rain, but the intensity that's causing us the biggest issue.
So it's not because we're below the groundwater table.
Doesn't appear to be as big an influence as the rainfall.
Moving on to Southport. I guess the market is getting a little better. Probably there's some building going on out in that area. Maybe we'll start getting a little bit more flow. I think the future have it that we will. I think we got some improvements going on out that way, some of the lift stations, so we should have an increase of the flow, which would definitely help the plant. It's underused right now, and we're looking forward to trying to get the utilization that we need.
Did I understand correctly earlier that you had to have at least a class 1 or 2 at the 2 big plants, not Southport, but the other 2?
Academy.
Oh, just Academy, not Dunbar, okay.
You gotta have 3 at the others.
Okay.
You gotta have a licensed operator there during day shift. At the other 2, night shift, you don't have to have anybody there as long as they're on call.
But Academy has to have 24/7, class 2 or both, okay.
Currently we got Alvin actually oversees the Southport and the Dunbar plant with his class 1 license. He's there throughout some, for different plant, once or twice a day. But we do have a class 1 at Dunbar that's over there all the time. And
I just misunderstood. I thought it was the 2 plants. I was wondering how you did 2 plants with 3 people or 6 people. It's just one.
Academy, you gotta
Yeah,
have.
I got you.
Okay.
Is the lab work done at each plant?
Lab work's done at Dunbar. Dunbar supports Southport and Dunbar and Academy Creek. But we all work together. Of course, we have people that calls out sick here, so we pretty much maneuver together. Whatever we need to have a lab person. Sometimes we bring the lab samples over to Academy Creek to run them there when we shorthanded. unforeseen reasons.
How many times do you run the labs a day?
Every day.
Yeah,
Well,
just once a day, or?
It's 5 days a week at Academy Creek and three at each other plant, Dunbar and Southport.
Each 3 days or three times a day?
No, 3 days.
You run each test once a day
Once a day.
for the required sampling. Now, operational tests are run on every shift, but they don't show up on here.
Right.
So the lab work's only done once a day per test.
So we have to transport it from one,
Yes, sir.
On your DMRs, you have to show how much solids is also removed, right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
But you don't show that.
Well,
TSS removal is on there, yes, sir. Are you talking about the sludge removal? Yeah,
Uh-huh.
that's supposed to be on there. When
That's
I
what-
printed this, I didn't have my print set right. It's on the sheet, I just printed it
on
wrong.
the previous sheet, last month, we removed 67 dry tons at Academy Creek. This month, somewhere along there, yeah.
Just over 70 this
Yeah.
month. It's on the sheet, I just printed it wrong. I apologize for that.
Okay, so it has been on sheets we've gotten before.
Yes.
Yeah, it'll be back on there. Like I said,
Okay.
we noticed that when we came in. Any other questions?
Would like to point out, and I talked to Mr. Turnipseed about this earlier, we approved a filter trial a couple of months ago. We've been waiting on it to get started. That is supposed to be delivered Monday. I would suggest if you wanted to see it in action, probably wait until the next week to come by, because it'll take a day or two to get hooked up and everything, correct. But starting that next week, we're gonna run it for 30 days. So anybody wants to come by and see the second filter in action, we'd be happy to have you down there.
How long we're gonna be running it?
30 days.
Okay.
and the material difference?
This is, instead of cloth media, this is a wire mesh, stainless steel wire mesh.
When we test them, how are we gonna compare them?
We're running the
Understand.
same exact samples from the same exact location as we did last time, which would be your TSS removal and any foaming events, which we don't expect to happen. And then, once we get that back, we'll look at what a permanent installation cost will be between the two, because there could be a sizable difference in cost depending on what you do.
Any other questions, gentlemen?
Good report.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Junkin, rehab needs.
Pardon?
Rehab needs, item 2.
Yes. This was just a discussion item to inform the commission. We've talked at the capital improvements workshop about improvements or rehab we need to do at the Academy Creek and Dunbar Creek, more Academy than the other. We've worked through and we think we've got it skinned down to what we really need to do at the two plants as a bare minimum. We are at the front end of the GFA loan cycle. We need to be moving ahead with getting basic applications in to get us into the cycle so we can get approved by December if we're gonna do this work in the coming year. So we're gonna try to finalize the numbers and provide a program of rehab for Academy Creek and some minor items at Dunbar Creek to present to you all for a GFA loan application here in the very near future. But I just wanted you all to know, we really are at that point where we need to be working this thing and getting it through. And I'll share the analysis we've got for the items that need to be repaired, rehabbed, and we'll look at those numbers. Numbers, just for your information, run between 9 million and 12 million total.
Okay.
Basically, it's a real short application that needs to be submitted, and if we don't submit it by the end of December, you're not
Okay, can we look at the list that you're proposing to send for a loan,
Yeah.
November 1st?
Yeah, we can, and I'll go ahead and email it out
Okay.
out to you all.
So that we can review it and just have it as a discussion.
I'll send it out today.
And how committed is that money once we get it? I mean, the way I ask is, Or what I'm asking is, if we say we want 15 million for this, this, and this, is it like the splash where we have to spend it exactly on that, or we
Not
need to move it
exactly.
around? Do we have
With the state
flexibility?
revolving fund, you pretty much, they want you to spend exactly, but if you show where you've gotta deviate for whatever reason, they'll allow you to, but you've gotta provide the engineering back, why it needs to be changed.
And the process after you submit it, you have to pass the financial threshold. It's gonna be loan money. You might get some loan forgiveness.
That's true too, and we've got at least one of the items on there, I think we could push it into a energy or conservation type of opportunity to help us with the points to bolster our opportunities for, loan forgiveness.
But the loan payback won't require any kind of rate adjustment.
If we're looking at this filtration pretty seriously, is that one of your items?
It is.
Okay.
But again, I think we discussed it at the workshop. We're still looking at some of the operational things we can do to refine it. If we can get to the point where we see that we can accomplish what we need to without the capital, we won't do it. We're gonna have it in there, and discussions we've had are, have it as an additive alternate, but we're gonna program to do it. And if we get operationally to the point where we're managing it without having to, add hardware, we'll trim that money off of the expenditure. But there's a little bit of time between here and there to see that happen.
Okay,
So I'll email that document out to all of them.
okay. Are we ready for the next, agenda item, which is the financials?
Commissioners, have in your packages the financials for first 3 months of the fiscal 19 year. The first one being the balance sheet. The first item I'd like to mention was the cash and cash equivalents. The first line went from $775,000 in June to 1.76 at the end of September. $615,000 of that increase is actually due to cash transfers from our collection account out to reserves. This is as of June 30th. Those transfers actually were actually effected October 1st. So then that 1.7 should technically is 615 with those cash transfers. The other thing is, you'll see our bond sinking fund is continuing to grow for the next interest and principal payment. We have an interest payment due December 1st on that. The accounts receivable is down about $600,000. Some portion of that is SPLOST that we had to record as receivable at June 30th, and that's for accounting purposes. We had to report the receivable for the collections for May and June, and that's part of the collection of that was part of that reduction. And then you'll see under deferred assets and net pension liability, there's total deferred pension outflows and net pension liability. Those numbers haven't changed since June 30th. And actually, our auditors have not provided us with the entry that's necessary for June 30th as yet. I spoke to them yesterday about that, and they're supposed to be sending that to me.
Please explain to me again the unbilled revenue, why it was the same as in June as it is today?
We make that entry once a year at the end of the fiscal year. We have to report as revenue anything that was billed in the month of July that was actually for June water or sewer use. So we have to take each route for the number of days of service and prorate that for the days in June and for the days in July and report that as unbilled revenue.
But as we get into the fiscal year, it doesn't go away.
We don't make that computation each year, or each month, because in order to get the statements out, and we'd have to wait until the end of the month to be able to get that number, so the September statement wouldn't be out until the first part of November. There'd be a month lag on that to get an accurate number. And it really doesn't change, the unbilled number really doesn't change much from one year to the next, so it's not a material number in terms of presenting monthly statements. We could certainly make that computation, but it's time consuming and doesn't change the statements in any material way. There are other entries that we do once a year, such as the accrued vacation and accrued salaries. They don't change much from year to year, but so we only make them once a year, and they don't really materially affect the statements as a whole.
Where are we at with returning the deposits?
With what?
Returning deposits for longstanding customers?
We've
General
returned
update on
some. I know we're working with Harris, who is the provider of our software, to do an automatic or a download into our system to be able to generate those checks all at once rather than going through customer by customer by customer for all of those. Jay Sellers would know more about that. Is Jay still here?
I think Ladonna.
We have returned a good deal of our deposits, but keep in mind that a lot of those deposits were $5 and $10, and new customers pay $100 deposits, so it's going to continue to grow because we're getting more as a deposit now than what we're returning. So just because the number is going up doesn't mean we're not returning deposits.
No, I was just asking for a general update on where we kind of were. I mean, at one point, we, it's kind of separated out the commercial versus the residential, and I was just curious where we were in general.
How many deposits we've returned so far?
I do not at the moment.
I know I sign a lot of deposit refund checks every 2
Commercial
weeks.
too, or we got that fixed where we can return commercial yet?
No, sir, the ordinance would have to be revised to allow commercial, but the ordinance actually required return of residential, so we have started that process.
So are we gonna look at the ordinance, revising the ordinance for commercial?
We can.
We can.
I mean, I know we talked about it, I don't know if we ever officially made a decision, or we have to, or we need to
I-
put that for vote at some point, but, I mean, I
I
would
think
like to.
the staff needs to look at it and then come back to us and,
Well, that's kind of what I'm asking, is are we gonna,
We'll take a look at it.
Second page of the report is the combined revenue statement for the first 3 months. You see our revenues are running about $900,000 ahead of budget. The actual customer charges, which are the first three lines of that of the revenues, are running about $220,000 ahead of last year, or ahead of budget. I'm sorry, pro rata budget. Our net operating expenses are far below budget, about $600,000 year to date in actual expenditures. We do, however, have a large number of purchase orders outstanding. We're continuing to go through those and make sure that they are all valid purchase orders, and so those may not all come to fruition. And then you'll see bad debt expense. We have a year-to-date budget of $150, but we actually have an expense reported of $423. We're going through the accounts receivable listings, and customers that have accounts that are 90 and 120 days old that don't have, a lot of them don't have any activity for the last 90 days. We're actually making sure that they're a valid customer, and if can we track them down? If not, we turn them over to collection, which effectively turns them into a bad debt. once we subrogate the right of collection to the collection agency. So we're reducing the receivables for accounts that we are nearly positive we won't ever collect on unless the collection agency is successful in getting something from them.
Are the water and sewer revenues tracking what the rate structures studies show they would be, or are they lower or higher?
Actually, they're running a little ahead.
They're what?
They're running a little ahead.
Because it looks like sewer is above, but water's
Well,
below.
Again, the budget was put together with the rate structure as it was, breaking out the usage charges. The rate structure that was adopted at the end of June included 1,000 gallons of water and 1,000 gallons of sewer in the base charge. So those are being recorded, that 1,000 gallons is being recorded to a base charge number in the accounting records, so there's actually a budget adjustment that's necessary for that to bring that back in line. When you take those first 3 lines, that's the total amount that's on the customer's bill. The water charge, sewer charge, and the first 4 lines, an administrative charge, that's running in total ahead of budget for the.
Where are our tap fees showed in here?
Capital tap fees are down near the bottom, year-to-date, $340,000.
Okay.
And that's just the capital portion of the tap
That's
fees,
just
that
the-
is not the operational portion, so it's not the full thing.
It's the operational portion of the tap fee, the meter cost and all of that is an operational income because that offsets an operational expense of having to buy that meter and the other supplies and the labor to install it.
And we didn't budget an amount for that? We didn't,
No, sir, we don't budget for that. It's a restricted income, so we budget for our operating expenditures and capital expenditures. This money is collected and has to be reported as income, but it's swept immediately into a restricted reserve.
it could go to pay the GFA loan back though, couldn't it?
If it's for expansion purposes.
Yeah. Okay.
Back on the balance sheet, the total deferred pension outflow is $806,000. What goes into that number?
GASB 68 has about 5 or 6 different assets or liabilities that go into how it computes the total amount of pension due. Some of them are assets, some of them are recorded as liabilities. There's a difference in when the actuaries make their assumptions on interest earnings, that's compared to actual, and there's the difference is booked. The amount of payroll and the total amount of liability is one piece, and there are several different variables that are broken out, and they're recorded as assets and liabilities separately.
So that's not our annual pay-in then?
No, sir, no. Our annual deposit, or our annual contributions to the pension plan are $500,000 that I talked about earlier.
That's what I was confusing.
Yeah, these are computations that are required by GASB 68 to record the pension liabilities. Part of it's the unfunded pension liability that we have. After the revenue statements, the overtime report for the year, you see that there are some significant variances in some of these as far as year-to-date. And again, there's, in particular, the purchasing line is $3,700 versus a $500 budget. There was some shifting in personnel from the time the budget was drafted and when the personnel are actually changed, so we need to move money from one division to another. There are some other changes like that throughout the statements. Following that statement is the project report. The top portion of that is the budgets, the cost date, and so on, information that we use for the projects. The bottom portion of this is really the money portion. You see that's broken into the capital expansion, repair and replacement reserves that are defined by the commission, and then the capital improvement funds and the SPOS funds that have some legal restriction. We take the beginning of the year balance, add the deposits and transfers to that, minus the expenses to get the current funds, and then subtract from that the amounts that we expect to have to spend to complete the projects listed above. So you'll see that in repair and replacement, even though there's nearly $8.4 million of cash, we need about $6.8 million to complete projects, which leaves $1.6 million available at this point to commit to new projects. Under the capital improvement reserves, you'll see $3.793 million. This schedule was put together right at the end of September, and since that time, $3.2 million was set aside at the last meeting for a project out of those funds. And then today, the approval of the Friendly Express of $220,000. So between those two, there is very little left in the capital improvement funds to commit to other projects.
John, I wasn't on the commission last year, so I want to make sure I understood this correctly. But when y'all refinanced the bonds, those are big savings, obviously, in the repayment of it. But there was a good proportion of that, a big proportion of that savings was in the first year. Is that accurate?
It was in the first few months, yes.
First few months. So, I mean, which there's in the first year. So going forth in years in the future, as we start thinking about the budget for the new year, is that going to be a big hit? I mean, are we going to?
It's, going forward, it's about $220,000 a year savings going forward from.
This year it was like 800,000, wasn't it?
Pardon me?
This year it was like 800, wasn't it?
From December until September of this year, I think it was, yeah, well, we brought in $3.8 million because the debt service reserve that was required under the 2010 bonds was not required under the 2017 bonds. So that money was all freed up and transferred over, and that was done in the last fiscal year. Rather than making payments to the bond trustee, that money was used to satisfy debt service. And the money that we normally would have sent to the bond trustee to make principal and interest payments was diverted to the R&R reserves. Again, that's all recorded last year, and it's included in the balances that you see here.
How's that going to affect us next year?
Next year, the refinancing will save us about $215,000 a year in net principal and interest payments.
And this year it saved us how much?
This year it will be, well, this is $259,000 under the R&R reserve. That's the portion that spilled over into July and August from the refinancing. So it'll be that plus the $215 per year. So about 450 this year, and going forward to the term of the bonds will be 215,000 a year.
So we got to make that other 200 up somewhere from operational expenses in order to keep from having a gain.
No. Our actual debt service will be less each year than it would have been under the 2010 bonds.
We got a better rate when we refinanced it.
Right, that's where I was going. I thought we had, so this year we went up, our overall annual cost went up, our budget went up. And at the same time it went up, we had a decrease in our interest payment.
Yes.
And next year that increase, if that decrease is not there, then we're gonna have to go up even more to stay.
No.
No.
I'll get with you offline, I don't wanna bog the whole thing down, I just wanna make sure I understand that as we start. Maybe I'm not asking, I don't know how to ask what I'm trying to.
I may be misunderstanding what
So
you're
that
asking.
was all factored into the overall budget. See,
Right, that's my point.
The only way our expense would go up is if we raise the,
Yeah.
Not our expense go
expenditure
up.
side of it. But there won't be any additional expense on the bond issue
No,
as a result of the bond activity at all.
He's
I'm
not
saying,
talking
but
about
last year-
bond activity, he's talking about the,
Right, last year we had a big savings, but our overall utility expenses went up, and we had a savings from the bond reissue. So this year, we don't have that same savings from the bond reissue, then our overall expenses are gonna have to, our revenues are gonna have to go up even more if we're gonna keep the same operational expenses. I'll get with you later.
Well, yeah, we can talk about that later. I see what you're saying now, but the savings that we got last year were not, rather than going to bond debt service, they went to a reserve transfer. So it came out, the bottom line came out the same.
What you're saying is the savings didn't apply to our operations.
Yes.
But this year, we won't have that going into the,
No, we don't have that extra bump going into reserves this year.
right, so if we're gonna put that extra bump in reserve, which is what I thought we'd committed to, then we're gonna have to get it from somewhere,
Right,
which is
and
operations.
that's
I'll just get with you later on.
The 259, you'll see under repair and replacement reserve, 210C bond refinancing recovery of 259. That's the remainder that spilled over into this year, into this fiscal year from the December refinancing.
John, on this sheet, it has the projects. I've got a couple of questions. Project number 801, FEMA mitigation, $3.18 million. What's that for?
that's for the two projects, one to do the, switch gears at the different stations, and one to purchase 10, generators. As part of that, we have to front the money and then get reimbursed 85% by FEMA upon completion. So we have to earmark the money until we.
That's the grant that we applied for?
Yes, sir.
So we have to pay, we're paying 15% and they're paying 85%? Is that of the
We
3
pay
point?
100% up front, but yes, sir, that's what the ultimate is we pay 15% and they pay 85%.
So 85% of that 3.188 is gonna come back to us,
Yes,
right?
sir. That's
At
correct.
least we hope so.
Assuming FEMA keeps cutting checks, yes, sir.
Have we been approved for that yet?
Not
We
officially.
moved to the next phase in the process, so we got phase one, now we're in phase two.
So when 85% of that comes back, that's $2.4 million roughly. And that'll go back into our capital,
That would go back into the reserves once it's received back from.
okay. Then, like, we just approved the Friendly Express today,
Yes.
but I think last week or week before last, didn't we approve the one down in Southport?
Yes, sir.
That's $80-something thousand or maybe more than that.
Yes,
So
and those are
tell
not-
me how much more money we have for capital improvement.
As far as expansion,
Yeah.
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 Andrew's got the calculators.
313,000.
313,000 for this whole next year.
No, as we accrue more capital improvement fees,
Okay.
it will go into that.
And how much do we accrue each month?
It varies,
A little over 100,000 on average based on the first.
around 100,000 on average a month.
Okay.
Now, you're talking capital improvement, you're talking R&R?
Capital improvement.
Yeah,
100,000
that's
on
based on the number of taps we sell.
Can some of that go towards studies for sewering unsewered areas right now?
That's y'all's money.
Yeah, if we want, okay.
Yeah,
The other thing on the SPOS funds, when was the SPOS passed? It has 11.7 million and a 3.3 million.
That was, April of, or it
Was
was
it passed?
before that, it was the March, February, before.
But it was passed in November, but it couldn't be,
That's right.
they couldn't collect it until the first, the second quarter, the first of the second quarter is when they could start collecting it.
Do we have all that money yet?
No, it comes in every month.
That comes in monthly.
But we're on schedule so far as using it. We're not behind on those.
Yeah, yeah, collections are running.
They said we would, projected we would.
And so like on this project, the North Mainland, when we're moving it around, will we have the money to pay that when we do that?
With the 3.2 million out of the capital improvement reserve included with that.
But that was for the overage.
Yes, sir.
But even if not, if the SPOS collections, if we haven't actually collected the money from SPOS, we do have a line of credit established with BB&T Bank as well as the funds from the capital improvement reserve. So that'll provide the cash flow to complete the project, and then that line of credit would be, or the SIF, whichever one is owed the money, would be repaid out of the SPOS proceeds as they come in.
What's the interest rate on the line of credit?
It's LIBOR plus a point, some percentage. It's a floating rate.
Okay.
How does that compare to the GFA loan percentages?
It's gonna be probably higher than the GFA loans.
So when we request a GFA loan, will we not just go ahead and try to get enough where we can pay our other loans off and have it all rolled into the better interest rate loan?
We could, but we may not need to touch the line of credit, depending on the cash collections and the
Oh,
payout.
so there's nothing active on the line of credit?
No,
Okay.
no, it's just there to provide the funding if necessary.
and you are capped on a GFA loan for a one-year withdrawal at 25 million.
And it also avoids all of the paperwork and administrative process to obtain.
But
the
we could apply for the GFA general money for repaying back SPOS funds. I mean and just pay them back from SPOS funds if we want to do that in the future.
I think the reason why we got the line of credit was to meet immediate cash needs and not so much in place of.
It's more of it's money for cash flow. It's not money for permanent construction.
Any other questions?
And then the final page is the schedule of the cash and reserves. I've changed this a bit to break it down by operating and debt service cash accounts and a brief description of each of those and the balances. And here you'll see we transferred $614,924,100 out of the utility revenue account, which is our centralized cash collection account, which dropped that $1.6 million, $1.7 million balance to just over $1 million. 25,000 of that went into repair and replacement. 283 went into capital and so on. And then there's the SPOS collections for the month that were transferred over. But there's a description here of each of the reserves and how their balances are determined and how much of that is in investment accounts and how much of that is in cash accounts. And we're currently working on possibly expanding some of the investment accounts because of the movement in interest rates makes it much more advantageous for us to do that. So that's in process right now too. Happy to answer any questions if you have any on that.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you, John.
Thank you, John.
Gentlemen, we are to the executive director's update.
Mr. Chairman, just a few items to go over. I wanted to reemphasize, I shot everyone an email Monday about the activity we had related to shipping out some portable generators. Because we've got the Yancey agreement, have standby portable generators for rental in the cases of a catastrophe or inclement weather. We were fortunate that we had them staged at the Academy Creek plant and were able to facilitate providing some help to Bainbridge, Georgia. We got a call during the week last week and follow-up call this past Sunday, and Mr. Sellers was pretty good. He received the initial call from the head of DNR in Atlanta, and he rousted up the crews. Everybody got out. We got 5 portable generators down to Bainbridge in the wee hours on Monday morning. So we've kind of paid it forward from the help we got from Augusta, Georgia during Irma, I'm pleased to say, and hopefully develop some goodwill around the state. The other thing I want to report, just again to reemphasize, we weathered the storm well, no damage, everything went well. We only stood up for a partial night as a result of the lack of weather and damage that was going on. There was really nothing but a little wind and no rain. On the Representative Carter's liaison that's been helping us out with trying to track down some money, he put me in contact with DCA, Department of Community Affairs in Atlanta, a guy that told me about there's a CDBG DR grant coming out that's going to be approximately $64 million related to the Hurricane Irma folks that were damaged. There was 3 zip codes that are going to be impacted and get money from this. Well, one of them happens to be 31520, which is us, covers a lot of areas. The focus, I was told, was to be looking at things that could make help housing become more resilient. My thinking right now, we're going to be getting the final criteria for application to this grant, I'm told, somewhere around January. And at that time, I think the thing that we've got that might fit into this would be looking at where we've got septic tank neighborhoods that are having failing septic tanks. Certainly, when it floods, those neighborhoods see poo-poo in their yards, and this might be an opportunity for us to get grants to help some of those folks that are built in close to us and get them on our sewer system. We also spoke with the USDA folks about the grants and loans they've got, and the emphasis that was placed that they gave me when I spoke to them was that they're real focused on small utilities that serve 10,000, populations of 10,000 or less. So they weren't especially optimistic that there's stuff for us to do with their programs, but they were going to continue to look and see if we could find some other opportunities. I think I sent out a notice to each of you that there is a utility management conference in March in Nashville that's presented by AWWA and WEF, 2 major trade organizations that look at water and wastewater utilities around the country. The management conference is it's a national management conference. It's more geared towards big picture solutions of problems and issues and opportunities. It's geared towards this level of people looking at what other utilities have done that have been successful in achieving big things to solve problems or taking advantage of opportunities that are out there that made them more effective and efficient. I think it's a good opportunity for any of you that'd like to go, and if you would, let me know. Me and Janice will give us a hand and get you set up with registration in a room. That's March 5th through the 8th in Nashville. Mary Ross Park sewer line construction activities have started. They're dewatering over there right now. I'll remind everybody, if they've got any added items to me to include on our hot wash list that we've been trying to keep up with, please forward them in. Still looking to see what we can do with the SPLOST 2005 changes and get us approval to spend that money on projects directly as opposed to having work through the county personnel. So we're still working through that. Last thing I've got on my list to mention today is we're still working through the last throes of getting the strategic business plan out. I think we're gonna have it out for the first week or so in November. Again, if any of you have any particular areas that you think we need to make sure we're addressing, we've got it pretty laid out, but you know, we could have missed something. I'd love to hear from what's important to you all, so.
Are we gonna do that during the workshop?
We would do the presentation during the workshop, but I mean, your input, we'd like to have the input now so we can incorporate that into what we'll be presenting. And that's my wrap up for the current commission meeting.
Commissioners, anyone have any comments?
The $1.5 million that you meant, it's in SPLOST, it was for the North Mainland plan, are we trying to get that reallocated to something else?
No, the way this will work, because of the way SPLOST is written, the laws governing it, basically, you have to spend the money on what they say, what the SPLOST designated in the language. There was 3 projects that are still tied to it, and what we were trying to do is get it in our hands so we could apply it to the wastewater treatment plant, you know, getting it fixed up and potentially set up for future growth. To do that, the ordinances have to be changed, the operating agreement has to be changed, everybody has to approve it for us to get control of that. Otherwise, we're gonna have to go through the county personnel, provide them with the details and whatever to go out and get engineering done and can try and contract whatever work gets done. We'll be doing the legwork, but we're not working towards moving it to a new project. We're taking advantage of the wording they've got right now.
Anything else? Just so that y'all know, I'm going to the conference in Nashville, and any of y'all would like to join me, that's fine.
I'm gonna try to get one day a couple of the other staff members, because the first day is workshops. They've got some really good, if you look at the email I sent around, they've got some good workshops.
That's gonna affect the Thursday meeting.
Yeah, we'll work around that.
Speaking of meetings, we're just meeting, same schedule in November, another 5 weeks, I'm assuming.
Well, yeah, I had not intended to have an additional meeting.
No, I mean, I was just asking, I didn't know if we had to shift things around because of Thanksgiving. I mean, shouldn't affect anything. So it's like first and third.
Let's see, the first meeting is gonna be the
First and
1st of November,
Right.
and then the second will be the 15th, and then
We won't meet again until the 6th.
that's correct.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, that's the plan, unless we need to change it.
No, just clarify, making sure I understood from my own.
And that'll stick the next meeting on the 20th. So, and that'll be our final meeting for the year. And then the next meeting will be the 10th of January, and the reason why I kind of put that the way on the calendar is so that the city and the county can go through their processes and select who's gonna be, on our commission. And then we can start, and that will be kind of a full day. Because there are a lot of things we probably need to accomplish that day besides just selection of a chairman and the swearing in of new commissioners. And then, of course, that starts off with the budget process. Executive Director has already started his budget process with his people. And so we should probably before the end of the year have the Executive Director present to us what he sees as just a big number overall if he's gonna require an increase in his operating budget. And then that would be his guidance if we approve what he's asking for at the top level.
And again, that's gonna be driven by what we come to conclusions on the strategic business plan. Hope that's gonna be the tool, kinda like the counties do now. Use the strategic business plan to drive what you're
That's
doing
what
and
it should
fund your budget accordingly.
But, that's kinda it. Any other comments? Go ahead, Ben.
I spoke with USDA Rural Development, and a larger portion of Glynn County is eligible for funding. Nothing in Brunswick is. But outside of Brunswick, to the north, all of that area is eligible for funding. Those are 40-year loans. And they do sometimes supplement grant depending on what your rate structure's at. Now, and so like if we wanted to sewer Arco or someplace up in Sterling or something like that, it's something that we might want to consider. So we just need to keep that in mind. And what I think, and I just wonder if, like Ellis Point, when the lady came before us with that, shouldn't we as a commission be sending out some kind of form letter to the residents out there just to gauge the interest rather than having one person?
Oh,
She had street, captains that she said that were gonna go each street, so it's, apparently they've got a neighborhood association of, formally or loosely, some kind of way where they.
Mm-hmm.
Do they have something to tell the people,
Well,
though? Do they understand what?
I think they were just gonna go
Well,
ask who's interested.
I think this, we're getting off the subject here, we can let the staff look at it more, but I think that, taking what you're saying, that we ought to hire somebody, because I don't think his staff right now, with everything that they're trying to do, can accomplish it. But I think that if he came back to us with a recommendation to hire somebody to ramrod some of these studies, such as, and I think we need to do this, the transition of people who are septic onto the system and putting water out in locations, that's a good thing to do. And then we could probably justify using our capital improvement funds, because that's an expansion, to pay for this person and not have them in the operating budget, but pay them out of that and based on success. It's just kind of like free thinking right here in the discussion period that I think that Jimmy and his staff ought to look at and come back to us with a recommendation. Is that where you're going?
Yeah, I just think we need to be moving in that direction and figuring out how we're gonna gauge the interest.
Yeah.
And if there's enough interest, then we can do the study. But we have to find out if they're interested. And the only way to find out if they're interested is to send them some information. If they have street captains, provide the street captains the information so they can tell the people something. Otherwise, yeah, everybody's interested in sewer, but it depends on what it's gonna cost too.
Yeah, they're actually,
But
yeah.
the first question they're gonna say is what's it gonna cost?
If folks
Yeah.
have really got a problem, they're gonna step up.
Well, what we, at least what I hope we do, whether we do it in-house or do it with a third party to reach out to people in Ellis Point or wherever, I hope that when we ask them if they would like to have water service and or sewer service or both, that we give them an idea what it's gonna cost them out of pocket to make that happen.
I think we can give them a hand grenade kind of number.
Well,
I don't know that we can give it to the,
I'm not talking about to a penny, but I think we can give them a fairly close idea, or we can tap fee, tapping in. I mean, we know what that is, okay, pretty much.
we know the tap.
Hooking up to us, okay, we can tell them that.
Separate from the.
We can tell them that, but what they're gonna have to pay for, grinder pump and all that, we can give them a number, for example, based on so far from the street, a grinder pump, so, we can give them an idea what it's gonna cost, because you know what happened over at, what's the neighborhood right there on the left, Epworth?
Epworth, correct.
Epworth. All those folks want to get hooked up, didn't they?
They did, or at least a bunch of them did.
They all want
They
to get
didn't-
hooked up. How many's hooked
They
up?
wanted gravity
Yeah.
sewer essentially.
But,
That's too
but
expensive.
when they found out what it was gonna cost them, they didn't want any part of it. And I don't think we need to, I mean, we can put together something to give them an idea of what it could cost.
I would say right now,
Because we know it's not gonna be cheap for them. And people that are on septic tanks are faced with spending $10,000 when their septic tank fails. And they know that. And they'll say, gosh, I wish I could get on water and sewer, but it's not out here. Well, at what cost? That's the question. I think we can furnish them enough numbers. Give them a good idea,
if we look at the grinder pump type systems, I wanna say, Todd, wasn't that about $8,000 per household when we looked at Orenco 12?
It depends. We figure about 10 is a real general number per household
Now-
for the equipment.
Yeah.
Now, if we let them apply their tap fees towards that,
Yeah.
that'd
Well,
help
we gotta, I think we can sit down and come up with something that, and we can qualify it, say this is without knowing a particular resident's situation and what it's gonna actually cost, but it could conceivably cost this amount of money. It may cost more, it may cost less, but we can,
I'm gonna say, if your septic tank is failing and they have to go do an engineered system, Todd, what are we talking about? $20,000 to do an engineered,
You-
septic system when you have a failing field?
you're doing from 10, 13.
It really depends on the soils and all that,
Well-
but it can range any 10 up. We've heard 18, 20.
Yeah.
18 would be a high.
There's some bad, there's some bad but.
Well, we just approved some money, so we got some capacity up there. And, yes, they'll be paying tap fees, we know that. And there might be some additional costs they'll have, like running the lateral to wherever the sewer is or whatever, or the grinder pump. But we're also gonna be getting, revenue from them.
That's
and
correct.
There's a lot of customers out there. And once we start going in one direction, we can start going, there's a lot of people out there that are not connected to sewer. And so if we don't get enough interest from them, I mean, if only 50 out of 250.
Yeah.
then-
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
We
Not a
can
big
do
deal.
it.
Yeah.
But
Todd's folks are already getting together the survey and mapping all the septic neighborhoods that we've got in our service area or within reasonable reach of our service area.
We're reaching out to the entities that have that information to see if we can get that, and I would love. to work
Department of
with-
Public Health.
Right, I'd love if we could create a septic tank layer.
And a lot of these though, are already on our water system, so we have their addresses. You could almost send it out with the water bill just about.
Good.
Now, like Ellis Point, I think they have their own water system, and some of them have their own water system.
Well, we need to have kind of a work group talk about some of this, because we're collecting money from existing customers to pay off debt that we have. But we're not gonna change our rates for these new people, the rate structure. So the dollars that an existing customer is paying, that's part of the debt payoff, they're not really part of, and those dollars that are part of their rate could be earmarked to pay down any debt that we assume to give them the service.
Well, I would maybe go a slightly different direction. I would probably say they continue to pay the same debt service portion as everybody else, their fair share.
Well, that
And
requires.
if you want, add a surcharge to help pay off the debt service.
Well, that's
for
what we
that
need
area,
to,
'cause we
that's what
talked
we need to
about
talk
that.
about.
I think somebody brought up the concept of doing, decentralized wastewater treatment, some of the bigger developments, if it comes about, we talked about, well, how would we deal with that? Well, if there's added costs associated with that particular subdivision or that particular development, we might just add a surcharge for the added cost of dealing with them.
Yeah, you could do it that way too. We just need to kind of follow Commissioner Browning's lead and come up with what that ballpark figure is,
Yeah.
but try to keep the step-up cost to a minimum.
Would the commission be okay if we allowed in neighborhoods where we're going in to do this, we would just apply the sewer tap fees to the overall expense? So they didn't have to come out of pocket twice. That's what I'm trying to say.
I mean, I understand that,
What-
yeah,
what-
I mean, I can buy into that because that's an expansion of a system, and that's what those dollars are geared for.
And some of them are gonna be gravity sewers, there might be some that might be pressure systems, we don't know yet.
That's true.
Let's just don't say all of them are gonna be pressure systems.
No, you're right.
We need to try to serve the underserved.
Yeah, I just remember, I wasn't on joint water sewer at the time, but I remember that really was that was an issue. Over at Etworth, it was a big stinky messy issue, and I tell you what, they even pulled the Board of Commissioners into it. And, when there's a right way and a wrong way to handle these kinds of things. And, I just feel like we should always, if we have an idea, if you wanna come on our system,
Here's what you might
okay.
be looking at.
But it's not as simple as you're not gonna have to pay $10,000-$15,000 for a septic tank, but you are, in the future, you're gonna get off that, but you are gonna have to pay this, this, and this, or roughly these amounts when you come on. And I'm not saying we should do that to scare people off, I'm just saying we should do that so folks will see what they're gonna get into, because, I've talked with some of these people, a couple of these people that were down here before us from Ellis Point, and I know why they wanna get off. And I also know in my mind, knowing that they ain't got no idea what it's gonna cost them. See, they just don't have any idea what it's gonna cost them.
We're also facing the issue that some of the older ones,
Yeah,
I think it was expressed in here, wasn't it? That they think because they've been living in this county for a long time paying county taxes,
Yeah.
that somehow should cover.
I got an email last night as a county commissioner about it. Somebody wanted to know because while so-and-so was going on, that they have been paying property taxes for 30 years. And so it's just,
Well, those same
You can't leave
subdivisions,
the commission until
we
work
aren't
through
gonna have
this.
everybody understanding how things work all the time, I know that. But we don't need to create more
but those,
uninformed.
those same subdivisions we're talking about, if they were not there right now, and the developer wanted to develop it, we would require that developer to put in sewers. So those people would have sewers. They just came along before that. But now we're out there in those areas, so we need to think about extending sewer to them.
Yep, that's.
And water too, if they don't have water.
I'm hoping with the survey that we're trying to build up and identifying what's out there and what's, who was potentially in need, then we go and research who is in need, as you were saying. But I do hope that CDBG DR grant money might provide some significant funds. If we could get even low-digit millions out of that, because we're one of 3 zip codes splitting up this $65 million. We might have an opportunity to really aggressively address that, is my hope.
Okay. Anything else on this subject? There's nothing else for the good of the order?
I emailed the commission about a governmental seminar that we're putting on. It's actually for next Friday, August 26th. Because of the number of clients and attendees that had RSVP'd from Southwest Georgia that are no longer able to come, we have postponed that until December 7th. So a lot of issues that address or that affect governmental clients and their staffs. So you are all welcome to attend free of charge.
Okay, thank you. Because the problem I had with going to it was that we'd already signed up for the state of the port
Okay.
that same day. So I'll look at my 7 December date.
That's the day before Georgia plays the rematch against LSU in the SEC championship.
I know who's gonna win.
For the SEC championship?
So you're gonna have more of the same?
Oh, wow.
Meeting is adjourned.
Oh, yeah, there you go. I know Tiffany's not in.